Yes, hello, I'm John Hind, a Director of Compass Resolution, author of the Divorce Manual. And today I want to talk to you about the costs of a financial mediation, a typical standard financial mediation. And this video is part of my video series, It's Not Rocket Science. And so you'll be looking at a flip chart to my left, on which I've scribbled some diagrams and so on, which I'll take you through in a moment. The first thing I want to kind of just describe, I just want to describe the setting I've decided to use, the metaphor I've decided to use, which, as you'll see, is a boat. And I use the boat for very good reasons, because, of course, mediation is a journey, and it's a journey from where you start with you, yourselves, me, in a boat. And we're going to head to, hopefully, a destination which is your successful outcome, your fair financial agreement. And on the way, of course, there'll be a certain amount of variables and often quite a few variables, what I call the environment, the weather, and so on. And the costs I'm going to talk to you about, the amount of costs, often depends on all sorts of variables, how well you and your former partner work together in mediation. Many of these variables you can control, and some of which you can't control. And so, of course, what I'm going to talk to you about is based on what I call a standard financial mediation. Having done this for about mediated for about 25, 26 years, I would say most mediations are between 2 and 4 sessions. So hence, I've used this 3-session model, session 1, session 2, session 3. So let's go. At the start here, having carried out our initial pre-mediation meetings, here we are, our typical team, our problem-solving team, if you like. You and your former partner are the decision makers in mediation. It's self-determination, voluntary, and so on, which is really important. And here I am, or here the mediator is, I should say, who's going to guide you through the journey with information, facilitating communications, linking you up with various experts if needed, which I'll talk to you about, and so on. Lots of things the mediator does. Myself, I was a former lawyer, and so many of the mediators you'll come across are former lawyers, and certainly within the Compass team, we're all former lawyers. So treat us, if you like, as a neutral lawyer, but a mediator. Our job is to be neutral and impartial and help you navigate this journey. So we're about to set off on the journey. Before we set off, there is a preparation stage, the financial disclosure stage, when you both provide me, the mediator, with all your financial information. Now, how long I take or how long the mediator takes often depends on you doing what they ask. In other words, providing information in the format they've asked for, the financial disclosure booklet, which we'll hear me talk about, and the income and expenditure spreadsheet in the Compass Resolution format. As long as you provide those 2 documents, that should be enough. And I can say that I take in the region of 1 to 1.5 hours before the very first mediation session. Before we jump in that boat, if you like, for the first session, I spend about an hour and a half, sometimes 2, but I usually limit it to about an hour and a half, going through your pre-mediation, the MyAMS assessment notes, just looking at what your priorities are and the dynamics and patterns and all the assessments I looked at. I will put together an open financial summary spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, and essentially get myself ready for when you pop up on the screen, both of you, and I'm ready to get going. And we're all in the same boat, linked in here, you both and me, the mediator. And we've prepared ourselves and we're ready to go. And this is session 1. Each session is 2 hours. Some mediators have 1.5 hour session, but I find over the years that 2 hours is about right. And after each session, I spend about an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, but I usually charge an hour and a half. If it's shorter, of course, I don't spend an hour and a half, it's an hour, but usually an hour and a half on the outcome summary. So at the end of each session, end of session 1, you'll get a financial spreadsheet, which I've prepared, and we've been through in the first session, and you'll get an outcome summary, which is confidential privileged, recording conversations and priorities and options explored and so on. It gets us underway. Okay, so that's first session, 2 hours and 1.5 hours, and I spent about 1.5 hours preparation. In between, just after the first session, what I'm finding at the moment, and I've started to do this over the last few years, is get on board into our boat, if you like, what I call a financial neutral. This FN here, financial neutral. They become what I call a crew member. They're working with us or in mediation, and they're working with both of you, you and your former partner, outside mediation. And they could do a lot of things, really useful things. They can link you up to the pensions experts, I'll come to in a minute. They can help you prepare budget spreadsheets. They can help you look at your forecasting, your income needs. Is what you're going to receive going to meet your needs, your income needs? They can help you with investing any capital and so lots of things. And there's a chapter in my divorce manual all about the role of the financial neutral, but that's not the purpose of today. It's about costs today. And so if we bring in the financial neutral in between the first session and the second session, I might spend, the mediator might spend about half an hour on an introductory meeting, bring them in, preparing them for that meeting, and so on. So I've added a half an hour there. Could be a bit longer, but typically half an hour. So I'll add it all up in a minute. But just follow me through if you would. So we now come up to the second session. You've got the financial neutral on board, and they've got us underway, and we're all working together. And if there are pensions relevant pensions for which you'll need a pension report, again, we'll talk about that in mediation, you'll need what I call a POD, Pensions on Divorce Expert. Here we are. Now, the POD doesn't jump in on board with us. They're, if you like, shore-based. They're not in the boat, they're on shore-based. Their job is to provide a report, as they've been asked to help you and your partner reach a financial agreement incorporating the pensions, which will probably take place in the second or indeed third session. So in the second session, again, you may use for things like working out any interim maintenance, how outgoings are going to be paid, and so on. Or you may, by that stage, have the pension report and be looking at the whole financial settlement. It really depends. As I said in the outset, there are variables. Anyway, so we're in the second session, and again, a 2-hour session and 1.5 hours preparing the outcome summary. And in between, of course, you can update, we're all updating the financial Excel spreadsheet. So when we start each session, that spreadsheet of figures and data is up to date. And of course, you can work with the financial neutral to make sure that's up to date. After each session, I prepare a summary, a confidential privilege summary of the conversations, options, proposals reached, agreements reached, and so on. Assuming you haven't reached an agreement in session 2, which is unlikely, if it's a really simple case, it might be possible, but most cases, I say standard cases where there might be a pension report or some maintenance to look at, then it's usually 3 sessions, possibly 4, but usually 3 sessions. So let's move on to the third session, by which stage you've got the pension report and you've worked with the financial neutral to get the pension report and to understand the pension report, and the pension report comes into the process, and we're here on session 3, and I will spend 2 hours with you helping you reach a fair financial agreement. Sometimes the financial neutral comes into that session as well, but let's assume for the moment they don't. 2 hours for me and 1.5 hours on the summary. So as you can see, just a quick recap. Oh, by the way, before that, when I get the pension report, I may well spend half an hour to an hour making sure I understand the report so that I can work with you with the report. And so I built in an hour there. It could be half an hour, it could be an hour and a half, but typically an hour by an hour. Let's build that in. It's kind of a reasonable amount of time. And so starting from the beginning, again, 1.5 hours preparation at the beginning, and when you've sent me all the information and I'm putting onto a spreadsheet and I'm looking at all my notes from our initial first 2 separate meetings, the MIAMs. And then the first session, total of 3.5, second session, total 2.5, 3.5. There's a half an hour in between the first and second session for introducing the financial neutral, bringing them on board into our boat. And the third session, there's again 3.5, maybe with 1 hour in between to deal with the pension report before we will look at that. That would be a total of 13.5 to 14 hours. Now, I haven't mentioned timeframes yet, so just hold on to that figure, 13.5 to 14 hours. In terms of time frame, you're probably looking at maybe 1 to 2 months from the date I very first see, or the mediator sees you, to complete all the documentation and so on. I put a little star there because, of course, it depends. You may already have prepared your, what lawyers call Form Es, and you may simply have to send those to the mediator, in which case that shortens to maybe a few weeks, depending, of course, when the mediator can get you into that first session. So 1 to 2 months, let's say. And then you have your first session, and then I would say typically between first session and second session, whilst we're all doing various things, working with the financial neutral, getting the pensions expert instructed, and you're going away and doing your various tasks, maybe a borrowing capacity report or whatever. So it's 1 to 2 months again from first session to second session. So hold on to that, say 2 months, but 1 to 2 months. And again, from second session to third session, again, 1 to 2 months. So it could be perhaps something like a total of, well, maximum 6 months and minimum 3 months. So maybe between 3 and 6 months. Interestingly, that mirrors the divorce process. So from the date of the divorce application to the first divorce order, the conditional order, used to be called decree nisi, you're looking at 5 months. You can't get the conditional divorce order for about 5 months. And that you'll need that, of course, for the judge to make your mediated agreement into a binding order. So it kind of mirrors that if you're doing well, and you're working well as a team, as that problem-solving team with a financial mutual, and all the variables, this wavy line, aren't too variable, and you haven't spun off in some direction. So coming back, 3 to 6 months, 13.5 to 14 hours, and I charge, and my Compass Resolution mediators charge each person £140 per hour plus VAT. So you can multiply that 13.5 to 14 hours by £140 plus VAT over 3 to 6 months. Now, I put a little green mark there, and you probably can't read it. It says emails, updating, and so on. There's an awful lot of mediator doesn't charge for, like emailing in between sessions, setting up meetings, sending you resources, organizing meetings. It could well be 2, 3, 4 hours or more in between sessions, which we do not charge for. I know solicitors do. They charge generally 6-minute units, so you'd have to add that to the solicitor's fees and so on. But we mediators don't. And so you're probably looking at, I'd say an estimate, and it's pretty accurate estimate for a 3-session mediation, fairly standard, pension, maybe a house or two, some investments and so on, pretty standard, not too complex, not too simple. And so about 3 sessions, about 13.5 to 14 hours, and around about £2,000 each for the cost. That's £2,000 each, and so on. I've put a little note there, perspective. Now, that might sound like a lot of money. Of course, it is a lot of money. It's £2,000. But please compare it when you look at that and listen to that figure and how I've described this. Please compare it with some of the other processes. I was a former lawyer for many years, 20 odd years, and I can tell you that, of course, the lawyer-led process is significantly more expensive. Then there's arbitration, and there's private judging, private FDRs. There's lots of other processes. Look at the costs involved to be able to make your choices and comparisons. It's important when you do decide on mediation. But this is a cost of a typical mediation. It could be, as I say, 1 to 4 sessions. I've taken a 3-session model, about £2,000 each, and for which, of course, you would have to add the pension report. Typically, I'd say £800 to £1,000 each for the report, for the expert I use. Other experts could be £3,000 or £4,000, but we've tried to work my organisation at keeping the costs down as far as we can. So you can probably add about £1,000 each for the pension report. And the financial neutral depends how much you ask them to do. Say, I don't know, £500 to £1,000 each, something like that. So you could be looking at, with the pension report, 3,000, with the financial neutral, 3,500 to 4,000. Again, please keep in perspective, have a look around and look at the costs of other organisations and other processes. That's it for now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this has given you a good idea, this journey I've taken you on in the boat, and it'll give you a good idea of costs, which you can, of course, revisit and have a look at if you need to. Thanks very much for watching.